Good morning. Hello, can y'all hear me? Have I joined with audio?
Yes. Morning.
Good morning.
Good morning. Hello, everyone.
Hey.
Good morning. Hello.
I finally moved in. Sorry, I missed the last Zoom meeting.
Have you, so you got moved into the new place
Yes.
in, in the bustling metropolis of Dallas, North Carolina?
Yep.
Oh my.
And I'll probably upload the short Excel videos in 1 or 2 weeks, like before the end of February.
Okay. For the next class session.
Yes.
Oh, good. Yeah. Good.
How are you doing, Dale?
I'm just excited to be here. I'm just fit as a fiddle. I'm just happy as a lark. I was so excited about class this morning, I could barely sleep last night. And so, as I was reviewing my notes last night, I just got giddy with excitement.
Are we using the exact same Zoom link for different Zoom session meetings?
Exact same one. I set them up that way so that everybody, it's the same one. You can just click in the same one each time. I did a recurring.
Okay.
I've got a pro account that allows me to do those kinds of things, and it's really nice. It's a lot easier.
Yeah.
They've added, if you'll pay for it, they've got a really, the pro account's got a really nice features that makes it really easy to set up recurring meetings and those kinds of things. And so I always set them up as all the Zoom links will be the same throughout the semester. That's as you going forward teaching this course, that's a really neat trick. And then I use Web Connect email class function, or you can use Quickly. Sometimes Quickly gets blocked because it's actually a third-party vendor inside of Blackboard, and people sometimes it blocks. But if you use Web Connect, which uses the Outlook system, and then I just send out 5 minutes before I send the link again, just as a reminder. I find that gets the best participation. That way, if people can't find it, it'll pop up just before the time for them to come in with us anyway. Let's see. Okay. I've still got a couple minutes here. Let me see.
It's too cold outside for t-shirt. So, yeah. So.
All right, I've got time. All right, good morning. Hope everybody, I'll stop my share and see who we've got this morning. Looks like we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. So I think we're ready to start. Welcome everybody. This is DEOL 738, Research Methodology. Dr. Scarlett's with us this morning. Glad to have her. She got moved into her new house. We congratulate her.
Thank
and her
you.
husband, Mitch. They've struck out on their own with their son, and so congratulations. And Ben, we're glad to have Dr. Scarlett with us. And also her husband, Mitch, works with us on the main campus. We're glad to have them. I'm going to go ahead and hit my share button, and we will look at our weekly schedule before I turn it over to you folks. Today is Saturday, February 15th. We're doing case study 16A today. Do your PowerPoint presentations and then reflection. Next week you're at home. You're still working on your discussion boards with Salkind, 11, 12, 17, and 21. And then, as you can tell, a couple of you have completed the Salkind test on chapters 2 through 6. Remember, that's in light blue on your screen. That means that that's optional. The discussion boards are not, but the tests are. That's up to you how deep you want to go. I've graded a couple of those. You're doing really well on those. We'll be back online again 2 weeks from today on the 29th for our case study data called data gathering. The following week in March, on the weekend of March 3rd and 4th, we will convene again in Charlotte. I'll bring breakfast. If you have specific requests, or that's March 7th and 8th, excuse me, we'll be back in Charlotte on the 7th and 8th of March. I'll bring breakfast. We will complete Salkind and Miriam that weekend, our qualitative book. And so after that is spring break. Then we'll have another case study. And then giving feedback. And then that will be our fourth and final case study. And then discussion boards, Easter break, face-to-face. Our last class in Charlotte will be May the 2nd and 3rd. Just as a reminder, on May the 2nd, we'll cover the last of our major sections on program evaluation. We'll try to wrap that up by about noon on that Saturday, and we'll start at noon with your presentations. Just want to give you a heads up. There's no way we can do all 13 on Sunday. So we'll try to start as early as we can on Saturday. So be prepared on Saturday. if you will, to start your final presentations. We'll talk more about that when we meet in Charlotte, what the expectation. It's all in the shell if you want to go in and read it. But I'll cover that explicitly when we're together again face to face, and we'll launch that around lunchtime on Saturday of our last weekend. Try to get half, and then we'll get the other half on Sunday. That way we can get you out at a reasonable time. If everybody takes 30 minutes, we can knock out half on Saturday, still get out on time on Saturday, and then we can still get out by 1 o'clock on Sunday if we kind of stick to our 30 to 40-minute range on our presentations. So that's where we are. All right, hold 1 second. Let me take this call. All right, sorry, I'm good. All right, so this morning, let me minimize that. So this morning we're on case study 16A, team diagnosis and intervention. And so our questions this morning, below you'll find a summary of a team's average response on a short team diagnostic survey. Answer the following questions. And so you've got, this is a explanatory design of mixed methodology. We start out with our quantitative data from survey on a Likert scale. We've already covered all these things. This is mixed methodology research. Start with your quantitative, and then you use your qualitative to try to explain your quantitative numbers. We have a 5-point Likert scale from strongly agree, disagree, neither agree nor disagree, agree, strongly agree, and then we got our average scores. And so there is our data set. And then we did qualitative questions, which were open-ended, where we asked people to explain their ratings and sum that up for us. And so this is our data set, qualitative and quantitative in the explanatory model. All right. We have a request to go first due to a time constraint. All right, who's gonna go first that talked to me this week?
Kitty, Raven, Keisha.
All right, who am I gonna make the host?
Kitty.
Kitty. All right.
Hello?
Kitty, are you there?
I am.
I'm making you the host right now. Yes, I'm gonna stop my share. You are now the host. Let me stop my video. That usually helps as well. So Kitty, it should come up in 1 second.
You gave it to Keisha, it looks like.
Uh-oh. Oh, 1 second.
Can y'all hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Let me reclaim the host. All right, Kitty. Yes. All right, Kitty.
Okay. Okay, so good morning. Again, this is the team diagnostic and intervention case study. Case study group consisted of Rod Brown, Keisha Bryant, Kitty McCoy, and Raven Neal. We wanted to begin by just a little background, kind of thought about, the point of qualitative and quantitative information and the point of the team diagnostic survey. We found that, when these type of surveys are actually given, research has indicated that there's at least 5 conditions that they're looking for that when present, certainly increases the probability of the team's effectiveness. So we have this 12-member team that is under the leadership of John, and they responded to this team diagnostic survey questionnaire, more likely in order to evaluate the team's readiness for success relative of critical factors for the team's effectiveness. So just right off, we found that, there was some strengths that was listed. So we found that 5 strengths out of the survey results. One is that the team contributes to the organization's goal. So the team felt strongly about that. The team's goals are clear. Team members understand their role on the team, and there was some sense of proud work being done collectively, and they felt like they were high performing as a team.
All right, and as we kind of analyzed it, we kind of developed current issues and some contributing factors. Current issues we also kind of labeled as areas of growth or improvement, as you can see from left to right. And I'll just kind of loosely kind of navigate the screen. You can kind of follow on left to right. The first area of improvement that kind of stood out was that there's a lack of continuity and a lack of trust for all team members. And on the right, we can see some associating factors. And one factor that's kind of contributing to this lack of trust is the culture, the cliquish culture that's kind of in place and kind of gone unaddressed or unacknowledged. Secondly, current issue is that not all team members motivate one another. So there's a lack of cohesion as a contributing factor here. And the third area of improvement that we see is that the team just don't handle conflict. So conflict resolution is certainly an area that we've identified as a growth point. Associating factor with that, as you can see on the right-hand side, is a lack of communication. Can't over-communicate, but things kind of go south when we under-communicate. And fourth, there's several team members who are kind of indifferent, just really apathetic dispositions, so that there's very little motivation, it seems. So that kind of contributes to a fixed mindset. Seems like they're stuck. And number 5 is that there's a lack of empowerment that we see. So there's certainly some room to grow in terms of having all team members feeling empowered. And part of that deprivation of empowerment is due to the current leadership style, which we've labeled as an autocratic style, as opposed to a democratic or even a coaching style that's a little more hands-on. So these are some current areas of improvement that we've identified, and you can see right here the list that we've highlighted as contributing factors. And the next slide will focus on the central issue. We, after much deliberation on this, we've decided that due to inadequate team culture, we feel like that's sort of the root cause of all these other symptoms that we're seeing. This is a result of the lack of communication that we've talked about before. That communication deprivation, certainly hampers a total cohesiveness. So there's a non-supportive environment that's in place, and this decreases performance overall and overall effectiveness.
And so what we discovered were there were some opportunities that we felt like needed to be prioritized. And the first thing that we saw, one, because of the cliquish team behavior, was that there was the opportunity for team building and connectedness within this team. The second thing that we thought was possibly because John, there were some comments that he had favorites, or sometimes they wouldn't give feedback. So I'm taking the opportunity to make sure he's a competent leader and maybe retraining him as a supervisor. Thirdly, we saw that there's the opportunity to value each team member because some felt undervalued. Fourth, there's the opportunity to receive feedback from each team member because all voices need to be heard. And lastly, we thought that there was an opportunity for us to help the team celebrate successes. So the recommendations that our consultant team felt like we needed to make was, first and foremost, establishing a meeting protocol. So we talked about using something such as a six thinking hats approach that allowed everyone to be able to talk and their voices to be heard. Another technique that we thought about, since there was kind of some animosity and everybody couldn't talk, then using restorative circle practice to make it a non-threatening, safe environment to be able to share opinions or respond to different prompts or matters within the team. Thirdly, we think that it's important, again, to get John trained on servant leadership and other leadership development opportunities to make sure that he's competent as a leader, and quarterly professional development to build team building activities to keep that team cohesiveness and cohesion. And lastly, when there is a dispute, we talked about having a mediation process for conflict resolutions.
Okay, so we used a SWOT analysis as a snapshot of the present state of the organization, and to help us develop a strategy on how to help it move forward. So just shown in our the previous part of our presentation, the strengths are that the team contributes to the overall organizational goals. The team, they are clear on their goals. They understand their roles. They're proud of the work that they're doing, and they are a high-performing team. Weaknesses, they're not encouraging each other. We kind of sense that there was some competitiveness, especially in looking at John having favorites and where his attention goes. So there's probably some competition going on between the team members. They don't motivate each other. They're not openly handling conflicts. Several team members feel indifferent about the culture of the current culture of the team, and they don't feel empowered. And a good part of that is probably from John's autocratic style of leadership and being a dictator, telling them what to do. Opportunities, we've mentioned earlier, there's opportunity for team building and to start to connect the team, to retrain John, an opportunity for each team member to feel valued and to collect feedback from each team member, helping each person feel important and as an important part of the team, and then the opportunity to celebrate their success. Threats, we looked at how management is viewed currently in a negative light, and will continue to be viewed that way if things don't change with the culture. There can be a lot of or more unhealthy confrontation, which would lead to division of teams, high turnover, and decreased productivity, which we all know can lead to the demise of an organization. So here's the intervention plan that we've come up with, and we're looking at helping them to develop into a more effective team. And so our recommendation for immediate action is, one, for John to receive some leadership training, some professional development, and we recommend that he get some training in servant leadership to learn how to better serve his team effectively and fairly. Then we recommend that John provide conflict management training to his team. And we line out the steps that we recommend. So first, we recommend that John call a meeting with his team and have this be a regularly scheduled meeting, which in the data, it does say that they meet regularly, but the team doesn't really feel their meetings are effective. So we want everyone to feel a part of these meetings. We want everybody's input in the meeting. Part of that is to be able to resolve any conflicts effectively. Next, we recommend establishing meeting rules, being respectful, giving everyone opportunity to express their feelings and thoughts, which again, we recommend the team using the 6 thinking hats approach. Now we go more into helping John with conflict resolution. One, defining the problem clearly, giving everybody opportunity to talk about what they view the problem is and what the needs are. Then you go into listing your possible solutions and again, collecting that from the team as a whole. Then you go and you select the solution that you feel would be most beneficial for the team and to move the team forward and to get through the problem or the conflict. Next, you develop your action plan, and you want to be, we recommend that they be very detailed, who will do what by when. Next, implement the plan and monitor as the implementation is going. And then lastly, to evaluate the conflict resolution process. We also recommend that during this state, we use the SWOT analysis as a model for John so that he hopefully will use the SWOT to continue to assess his team as they move forward with these new conflict resolution processes.
So at this point, are there any questions that you may have for us, Dr. Lamb, or other cohort members?
I do, if nobody else does. All right. All right. What a wonderful. Monica, that'd be yes. What a wonderful presentation. You got it exactly right. So I have a couple of questions. I'm going to go back to the slide here. Now, as we started out this morning, this is mixed methodology. We collect quantitative data, and then we do qualitative work open-ended, where the qualitative tries to explain the quantitative. There's a problem, though. There's a problem in our methodology on the quantitative side. Let me go back to my share here. You got it right, but what did we do in our quantitative that if we're using an explanatory model, what did we do in our quantitative that's not a best practice? Let's look at our Likert scale. What are our choices? Somebody call out what are the categories that you could have picked here?
Strongly disagree, neither agree or disagree, agree, strongly agree.
And then we look at our average, and our average doesn't look too bad at all.
Right.
It doesn't match our qualitative, though.
Mm-hmm.
That's because of our design. We used a 5-point scale, and if we just look at the average scores, they look pretty good. Not too bad.
Mm-hmm.
But what we did when we're trying to do an explanatory, we should have done a 4-point Likert scale and forced a response one way or the other. What did we do here in the middle?
Gave them a neutral option.
That's right. And when we're doing explanatory, is that good? Is that a best practice?
No.
It absolutely is not. So if we went back looking at our distribution of scores, if we count 1, 2, and 3 as a group, and 4 and 5, which Net Promoter tells us that's what we're supposed to do, what we're going to find then is 2 separate and distinct teams. Because we gave them a center option, and if we went back and looked at it, it's amazing. It's almost down the line two separate groups. You folks pick that up out of your qualitative. Problem is what's John gonna say when you tell John he's got a problem?
The scores look fine.
Right.
The scores
look
look
at my
fine.
survey data.
Right. Because the scores appear to be high.
That's correct. They appear to be. They're artificially high because of poor methodology. But y'all got it right. Part of the learning in this case is if you're doing your case study methodology, when you're doing methodology, research methodology, and you're doing qualitative and quantitative, they have to match in terms of what you're trying to do. This case uses poor methodology on the quantitative end, and then it doesn't match what the qualitative tells us, and it gives people like John the opportunity to say, you know, I just got one or two malcontents. You know, I'm doing great. Look at my numbers. But if we had used a 4-point scale, it would have been clear even in the quantitative that there was two separate groups. That there's two separate. You folks picked the qualitative is clear on that. Quantitative is a little fuzzy. So we've got to be really careful when we're designing our methodology and we're using our instruments that they are as reliable as possible. And so you folks hit upon that. Your work was perfect all the way through. The only question I have for your group, and I don't think, I think this is, I think you've made it clear. You picked up that John is the real problem here. There is two separate and distinct groups. He has his clique and everybody else is on the outside. And you focused on John as the problem, as you should have. He is. My question to you is a group that just presented. Going back, if we went back and we forced responses, did a 4-point Likert scale, and all of a sudden these averages dropped and they exactly matched, as even if we just count the first 3 columns and then the second 2 columns, and we made it binary. They either agree or they disagree. It's basically 2 columns. If we went back and did that, would your recommendations on John change any?
I don't think as much, only just considering if the qualitative responses are still the same, because as far as the team, they still feel like it's probably cliquish, if that matches.
It is.
Yeah, and so I still think as the leader, and this is just be my opinion, team jump in. I just think John still will need some type of leadership opportunity.
Oh, absolutely. But my question is, if we went back and repaired or calculated our quantitative, as agree, disagree, you know, first 3 is 1 set, second 2. Would you recommend that we keep John and put him through all this? You got it exactly right. If we're going to keep him, we got to do, y'all hit every note. You got right down the line. Perfect. But would it influence your decision to keep John as the leader or not if your quantitative data was a little more clear? Oh, we got to put him through all. If we're going to keep him, we got to put him through all the things that y'all hit every note. What you're going to do if you're going to keep him. But if your quantitative data was a little more clear, a little more definitive, if we looked at it a little bit different, not just as an average score over on the right, but we looked at agree and disagree, which is basically net promoter, how happy people are.
I think it would just give us, I think in combination with what we would do with John, with the leadership development, I think it would just maybe highlight better what areas to focus in on with the team. Because I think the scores would show up a little bit differently, so we would know what particular areas of focus that the team would need.
Well, I think you would keep John, but I think it would be a stronger argument when you told John, when you gave him the results that you gave this morning. The blowback in this case is going to be John's going to say, look at my scores. They're not bad. I shouldn't have to go through all of this. You know, part of being a consultant is you can tell people and they can, but getting them to accept what you tell them is always going to be your problem as a consultant. You know, if they'd have wanted to change, they'd have already changed. They wouldn't have called you. That's the first rule of consultancy. If they were willing, or if they knew, they would have already done it and not had to pay you. And so your feedback to them, which was perfect this morning, has to be very definitive. And you've got to have both in mixed methodology. Here's your numbers. This is what it means from your qualitative. And you've got to make a strong case for your argument. And then in this case, I agree, I'd keep John. He'd be on a very short leash, though. I'd keep John. I think maybe I've changed my way of thinking. The further I've gotten away from the organization that I used to work for, in that organization, we'd have fired John. But you know, as I move further away from that and into the consultancy role, I begin to see that you don't really have that option sometimes. And so you got to figure out what you're going to do, but you still got to have an argument strong enough. I think if you look at if you had done a 4-point Likert and you had just 2 columns, basically agree and disagree, I think you could have made the case to the leadership in that organization that John's got to go. But it really strengthens your argument that your problem here is John. That we've got to put John through servant leadership. We've got to work exclusively on John first before we can even address the team. Well, y'all have that as well, what the team's got to do. But our central problem here in this case study is John. And our methodology wasn't what it needs to be to really hammer our case home here, that nothing's going to change in this group until we either change John or change John's behavior. And our data would be much stronger in an explanatory design if we had a better quantitative instrument that gave us more reliable results, is what we're looking for here. So excellent job. You hit the nail on the head. You started with John. This is what we got to do with John. It would just strengthen your case if you had a little better quantitative instrument. So going forward, the learning from this case is when you're doing a mixed methodology design, and you're always going to do that in a consultancy. You're always going to use mixed methodology. You're always going to get some kind of a needs assessment instrument in. You know that to start with. And then you're going to talk to people because you got to ask why. So you're always going to do mixed methodology in consultancy, always. If you don't, it's malpractice. So you got to do that. So you got to make sure that both of your methodologies are strong to give you an idea of what's going on. I am so pleased that you were not confused by the quantitative or thrown off. That you looked through all that and said qualitative does matter. See, too many times when we do mixed methodology, we put 90% of our faith and dependence and our belief into the numbers and what people say. Somehow we discount them. I've never understood that, even as a quantitative person. And they've got to have equal weight. And so you can kind of see through the numbers sometimes. That's what the qualitative allows us, to paint in color. And you folks kind of went, y'all saw through that. Excellent job.
Dr. Lamb, can I add something real quick?
Sure.
I think another tricky thing with this case is that the team is still performing highly. And so they're meeting their outcomes. And a lot of times when you see the issues within the team and the culture, it starts to affect the outcomes. So being that that's not happened yet with this team, I could see how it would be maybe challenging to plead to leadership that, hey, if you don't get the culture under control, it will impact your outcomes.
Thank you, Raven. That's what you've got to have a strong argument, because I should have mentioned that part. You've got to have a strong argument that John's got to get some help here, and the team's got to do some work, because they are high performing. But there's two things here that you've got to explain to senior leadership in this case. Number one is, how much higher performing would they be if they were not dysfunctional, number one. And number two, what Raven just said, you're on borrowed time. You know, you're on a trajectory toward the side of the mountain. This thing's going to crash and burn here before long. Now, you've got dysfunctionality here. You could be doing better, but more importantly, I always think of Ernest Hemingway. Somebody asked Ernest Hemingway how he went bankrupt, and he said, gradually, slowly, then suddenly. It happens that fast. It's not, the crash doesn't, you know, you're flying along pretty level, and you seem to be maintaining. And one of the things that people think is well, performance it'll have a natural decline. It'll be on a predictable angle. That's not true. It's just that fast. All of a sudden, boom, one day. And that's what you have to know. There's some statistical concepts behind that, regression to the mean, and some other things that we could talk about that I won't bore you with this morning. But what you have to convince senior leadership of is you're on borrowed time. John is about to run this thing into the ground. You're high performing now. You could be higher, but one day you're not going to be performing at all, and that day is coming soon. And those quantitative numbers would help you to make that argument if they were a little bit clearer. But Raven's exactly right. Your trouble is going to be, and see, John's not going to want to do any of this. I mean, he's not going to want to do any of it. He's look at my numbers. They're good. We're high performing. Yeah, but all of a sudden they aren't. This is one of those that we can predict how this is going to end. It's not going to end well, and it's going to end soon. Obviously, in cases like this, there's a problem. You wouldn't be there. But our quantitative methodology has kind of masks, or has made it not as easy to see that we're going to come to a not very good conclusion here shortly. And if we'd done a little better job on our quantitative methodology, our numbers would have been basically, boom, 2 columns. You've got only half your people basically are working and pulling the load for everybody else. You've got a 6 and 6 going on here, and it's dysfunctional. They're probably doing this instead of spending their time, effort, and energy outward in their job. They're too busy fighting one another. This is not going to end well, and it's going to end soon. So you've got to make that argument based on, look at the quantitative data, look at the qualitative data that explains it. And our quantitative is because we use poor methodology. Because remember, when you're doing explanatory, don't give them a middle column. Use a 4-point scale. Do not give them a middle column if you're doing explanatory work. All right, so Monica, are you going to be next? Monica, you're
Yeah,
first.
I just had a comment.
Are you there?
Yeah, can you not see me?
Yeah, you're kind of going in and out, but we got you now. Go.
I was going to just make a comment about the high performance part. I don't know that I necessarily would agree based on the survey data that we have that they're a high performing team, because all of the quantitative focuses on whether or not the goals of the team are clear.
Yes.
Ask about whether or not we're actually reaching our goal, and only one of the 7 people in the qualitative data say that they're high performing. So I don't know if we can necessarily say that.
That would be John.
Because all
John
of the
believes it.
that we're asking are just saying, do we understand what our goals are? Is there role clarity? Not necessarily whether or not we're achieving them. So I wouldn't necessarily look at this data and say that they're currently high performing.
Well, see, John would argue that based on the numbers. See, John would argue that we are high performing. Look at our quantitative scores. We are. He would that would be his argument against having to change his behavior. I agree. That's why I said we assume they're high performing, but we don't know. They could be much higher than they are now. We're making that based on John's assumption or his argument that they're high performing.
When I say, well, what I assume is that whatever their line of work is, whatever they're producing, they're meeting that, which we don't know because that's not in the numbers. Right. You know, if they work for a car production company and they're meeting their quota, that's what I'm looking at as far as them, you know, being a high performing team, their outcomes. So it seems like
we didn't assess the outcomes.
Right, it's an assumption.
It's exactly. The assumption is that John's going to say what?
We're doing
that's the assumption. So you see, John is the pivotal. John is the central problem in this case study. John is going to argue as Raven and saying, exactly, because that's the argument that I advance. So is that John's going to say we're high performing already. There's not a problem. The assumption is that obviously as the leader of the group, what is John going to say? We're high performing. They may not be, or they may be meeting their quota, but they're not high performing as they could be. And so he's going to use the quantitative as his argument. Look, Monica made a great point. This is not about performance. This is not a performance. This is a culture metric. Not, again, you back to reliability. What are you measuring? Validity would be the questions themselves. Monica is arguing that these questions are not a valid measure of performance, and she's absolutely right. We need a better quantitative measure, but we can't even really get to the validity part because the reliability part's not there. And what happens if, you know, when we apply our standards, if we can't get past the reliability, we don't really need to even get into the validity part, because this is not a reliable survey for an explanatory mixed methodology study. We could fix it really easy. 4-point Likert scale, you know, agree, disagree, you know, strongly agree, strongly agree, disagree, strongly disagree, where we can force a response. We'll have much more reliable data, and then we could get into the part about do these questions, are they valid measures of productivity? They aren't, but John's going to argue that because, and we're going to give him the opening to argue that because we used a not very reliable way to measure what we were attempting to measure. And he's going to seize upon that to say, nothing wrong with me, nothing to see here. I got a malcontent or two. When in actuality, if we'd had a better or more reliable method of measuring those things, even the questions that we had, we would have a much stronger argument that you've got two teams here, or you've got two groups, and you don't have one team, you've got two groups. And by definition, that can't be a team. But, you know, our central problem here is John, our methodology was poor. And so you got it right, what you wanted to do, but you may have a hard time convincing your client system, the senior leadership, that we got to work on John. because John's gonna use your own numbers against you. So, you know, you got to do better on your methodology. You got to work harder on your reliability on this one. You got to work harder on your reliability. We just assume too many times that we can just skip right over to validity. Nope. The first stumbling block is always reliability. That's the stumbling block in this case. And the central problem is John. You're exactly right. All right, who's going to go next?
We're next.
Monica's next, and so I'm going to make Monica the host. And I'm going to stop my video again because that normally helps you get online.
All right, can you see our presentation?
Team diagnosis and intervention.
All right, beautiful. Kiana, do you want to get us kicked off?
Yes, I'll go ahead and kick it off. Once again, this is Team Diagnosis and Intervention with Monica Gillette, Christina Hill, Jeff Hogan, and myself, Kiana McNeil. There was no real background on the team or the office, and looking at the data, there is a disconnection.
Yay.
There are 12 members of the team that voluntarily participated in the survey, and which we received some disturbing results. The cases is solely about poor methodology. It's a team within the team. The quantitative data was designed for it to not to look bad, but the qualitative data actually makes it look bad when you compare one another. They used the 5-point scale for quantitative, which means people could have neutral results. Just the team, we think that, it should be on a 4-point scale because neutral is going to give people a way out.
Yay.
Quantitative versus qualitative data, like I said, it doesn't match. The quantitative data average indicate the overall people, and the qualitative data, it looks more like a split team. And I know we was talking earlier about high performing team, and it looks like it's a high performing team.
Mm-hmm.
But coming from an HR perspective, John would be gone. He would be demoted, or terminated.
Exactly. If you were in charge, absolutely wonderful. So I said when I was in that role, John would have been gone. As a consultant, you don't have that option. But right, you're exactly right.
The qualitative method really tells the true story. It shows that groups have been formed under 2 groups that have been formed under John, and he's taken a liking to one of the groups, and it's probably the yes group, the ones that always we would say his amen corner. The people agree with everything that he say.
I'm your amen corner.
And when you look at cliquish can be, when you come from an HR perspective, cliquish can mean separation, which could lead to discrimination, depending on the employees on the team, the type, you can look at age, 40 and over, you can look at race, religion, sexual orientation. So you definitely got to be careful with, when you talk about team is cliquish, because that means separation. And the office culture team is, the in team and the out team. The survey, shows that it's definitely 2 groups. And competitive or cooperative culture, it's competitive. When you got 2 teams that's not working as one group, it's going to be competition, especially when you have the supervised leadership, taking one group and pretty much developing them, has taken a liking to them, versus the other group that don't get any support. You know, it's inability to reach a consensus.
Were improper methodology for collecting quantitative data. So we saw that there was 2 different methods used, and it was improper due to the Likert scale that was used. And then John has created a team that's very divisive. So 2 different teams are doing 2 different things. So the culture is pretty much different.
So in looking at our recommendations, as we said, there were kind of 2 central issues that we felt like affected this case. The first one was really related to the methodology of the survey. So our first recommendation to address that would be to resurvey on a 4-point Likert scale. But we would also look at evaluating some of the questions because, again, we felt like a lot of the questions that we were asking in the quantitative data collection was focused on role clarity and not necessarily the ways in which we work together or whether or not we're actually accomplishing what we're intending to accomplish. So there weren't really any performance metrics in that evaluation either. And knowing that John is likely going to lean into what the numbers say, we need to make sure that we're collecting the right information to validate kind of how he's doing as a leader, not necessarily do your people know what their job is and is there clarity about who's responsible for what, but are those things actually happening the way that they're supposed to be happening? And are we kind of working together in the most efficient way? Because we did feel like the quantitative data would indicate something different. So we want to make sure that we're asking quantitative questions that are going to support some of the qualitative data that we already have that we think might lead to what that issue is, so that we're really evaluating both of those things in the second round of surveying. The other thing that we thought would be really important is after you have redone the quantitative portion, it would be really important to also redo the qualitative portion and maybe ask some more intentional questions to make sure that, again, you're triangulating it with the quantitative data. Is what you're getting in the numbers matching what you're getting in the open-ended feedback? And to really just give you some more specific detail about what those issues are. Based on the information that we currently have, it does look like there's a culture issue. So we recommended perhaps looking at the Denison Culture Survey to figure out what specific aspects of your office culture are currently issues. And we'll get to that in a second in terms of where we think some of those are. And then based on those survey results, then you would kind of build an appropriate change management plan, because until you know what the specific issues are, you can't really build a plan to blanket cover everything. You really want to be intentional with what that looks like. And unfortunately, we would need more specific data in terms of what the culture issues are in order to start working on some of those. And then as we're going through that new survey process and collecting that new data, we do think it's important for John to have some coaching specific here from the current.
Okay, you're back.
Oh, as you say, it is very clear from the qualitative data that we have that there is a split team and there's kind of an in team and an out team. Wait until the survey is done to start working on that problem. So we did think it was important for John to go ahead and start having some coaching to address that issue. And then once we have the data back, we can kind of come up with a more specific performance improvement plan for John, knowing that some of those issues revolve around what his leadership is, because we'll have specific numbers and open-ended feedback to provide to him in that can justify kind of the performance improvement plan that we would recommend he be put on once we have specific data about what the culture issues on his team are. So in thinking about the Denison model, based on the qualitative data that we do have, it seems like kind of the goals, objectives, what we're supposed to be accomplishing on a team seems to be pretty clear. But we felt like the other areas, specifically with involvement and consistency, based on the qualitative data that we have, there doesn't seem to be a high team orientation, so we're not working together well. But it's also really hard for the team to reach consensus because it is kind of a split team. So based on the data that we do have, we feel like we know that those 2 things are an issue. So in terms of some potential team development interventions, we would really focus right now while new survey data is being collected on team and agreement. So some ways that we would recommend increasing your team orientation: leverage the goal clarity that and the roles that they play. So what was that?
We're losing you, Monica.
Oh, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can now.
Okay, so for focusing on team orientation, really wanting to leverage the goal clarity that we already have, so people feel like they have really clear communication about what the goals are. So using those open lines of communication to really talk about the new goals of being collaborative and working together. And then the other thing that we felt was really important is tying those to performance metrics for your team. So if collaboration is something that we know we need to work on, tying that to whatever evaluative measures currently exist for the team and making that a performance metric for them can be really important. And then as a leader, John really needs to work on planning intentional collaborative projects for his team, particularly for people who may be on opposite sides, to really encourage them to be working together instead of having kind of that split down the middle. And then we also felt like it would be really important to solicit feedback about John's performance so that we can kind of give him some opportunities to kind of grow and develop and help his team work together better. And then thinking about the agreement, so helping team reach consensus, encouraging team members to share feedback during meetings. And there's kind of two ways that we've talked about helping that. Is as you're talking about a new process or an idea, encouraging people on the team to play devil's advocate. So even if everyone agrees that plan A is maybe the best way to go, have people play devil's advocate just to kind of make sure that we're thoroughly vetting out the way things are working and create a safe space in team meetings where people feel like it's okay to maybe disagree with what the main group is and encourage that healthy conversation. And then require that your team present more than one solution to a problem. So as you're working through things on your team or looking at different goals and metrics, making sure that you're using more than one approach or at least thinking through more than one approach. Again, to get some of that conversation going so that it's not just everyone's agreeing with the in team. And then again, like the previous group said, you could use the 6 hats approach as a guide if that's something that's new for your team. Having the whole team walk through each 6 of those hats could be an effective way to kind of build that skill set so that they get used to having that kind of intentional dialogue as a team.
Can y'all hear me?
Yep.
We can hear you.
All right. So in response to some of the case questions about what is happening with this team, we've talked a lot about how there's definitely some cliques and some division. There's that inner circle that works with John, and they feel like they're really a part of the team. And everybody else is like, if you're not in that inner circle, you're lost, and you're not really a member of the team. And that's dysfunction, and that starts with the leader. And that's how he would respond to what's happening, that interpersonal team conflict, a lack of trust if you're not on that inner circle. And then it led to very little consensus on the quantitative side of things, and then a lot more was revealed qualitatively. So in presenting this to the team, we would want to be transparent. Here's what we have, and here's why we need more information if we're going to go forward and we're going to get better. So the current data is not valid. We need to do some resurveying and some relooking at other metrics with the 4-point scale and different qualitative questioning to really get a better idea of where we want to go forward. And then that team development and intervention that we would recommend, focusing in on orientation and collaborative projects. Like Monica mentioned, tying it to some metrics and performance metrics. If people know that they're going to be evaluated on their ability to work as a team, that's going to be a pretty strong incentive to work together and be collaborative. Encouraging the team to participate in healthy debate, which kind of on the next slide, you'll see that some of that is going to be new, and feedback and openness are going to be based on what the limited amount of qualitative data and feedback that we had. That's going to be new for this particular team to be open and honest and work really together. So kind of a little bit of a timeline. We'd want to start with that new survey and some interviews, and then spend some time with the Denison survey. We kind of pretended like they gave that and where we think that they would land, but obviously we'd want to redo that those surveys. Assuming that they're going to fall where we put them there, the focus would be on team orientation and agreement. We'd want to, and you'll notice on the far right hand side, several of these things are going to need to be ongoing, especially the performance metrics, tying that to collaboration, collaborative projects and teaming, a lot of the ongoing leadership training. If we're going to keep John, he's going to need to be on board with this. And then, like I said on the previous slide, that meeting feedback and the multiple solutions, if that's going to be new based on what the information that we have, it's more than likely going to be a new process for people. So there's going to be a level of discomfort with being open and honest and providing feedback and disagreeing in team meetings. So you need to have some training around how that can look and how that can be productive. Like Monica said, possibly using the 6 hats protocol or things like that, and coming to a team meeting with multiple solutions and really looking at pros and cons of each side. And that again is going to be ongoing. So some of our key takeaways, really the first bullet is the key. Methodology matters. We can't give people that neutral option. You're not going to get a clear representation of what people really think. The MISC methods are important and really gives us the valid measure of where we stand. So while we did have some consensus in the quantitative side, when we looked through those comments, it was clear that team was dysfunctional. And then if the data doesn't match, you probably have a methodology issue like we talked about. So redoing the Likert scale and rethinking some of those qualitative questions will get us to the real heart of how we're going to get better. Questions?
Me. All right. Anybody have anything before I start in again? Let's see. Let me go back here. Thank you. Excellent. All right. I am the host now. Let me go back. All right. I want to go back to something that Kiana said when we started this. If you are in senior leadership, well, I said in my former role, in senior leadership in an organization, I have a different decision to make than if I'm a consultant. And that's going to take me. I like the first presentation today was excellent in terms of what we got to do with John if we're going to keep him. Second one is about methodology and we're more organizationally. These two together are just incredible. So, thinking about, I like the 6 hats reference. It's a little, that book I just looked it up. It was published in '85, but it's still good stuff. Just because it's old doesn't mean it's not relevant, or at least I hope personally that's true. But anyway, looking at putting these two presentations this morning together and thinking about the change model. First step in change is unfreeze, move, and then refreeze. We'll do the simple change model. Looking at it from an organizational perspective, if you're a leader in the organization versus a consultant to the organization, what you've defined the problem. John, the first presentation defined the scope, really what you're going to have to do with John. How many of you, if you were the decision maker, as Kiana said, if you were HR, would you keep John?
No, I wouldn't.
Jewel, that's
Kiana again. I'm just saying.
I'm sorry. Jewel lit up on the screen.
I agree. I wouldn't keep him. This is Jewel.
I wouldn't. I'll just tell you that right now. If I'm going to have to put all this time and effort in this, I'm going to start with somebody that I don't have to unfreeze. Think about that piece of this. Sounds cold and heartless. It is. It is. But the hardest part of change is the unfreeze process. Then we got to actually move and then refreeze. But the hardest part of this is the unfreeze process, where we got to we got to do that piece.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
How much would you consider we want to get more data and better data with our presentation, but based on what we do know, we know that John has an inner circle. So how much do we consider if we get rid of John that people are going to go with him?
Is that a bad thing?
I don't know. I'm asking.
No, it's not. From an HR perspective, no. New is good. So we don't, in the HR world, we don't look as new as being bad. New people, you can train them how you want them to be trained.
There you go.
Taking that old stuff and having to maneuver and
unfreeze it.
Unfreeze it. No, new is good.
So unfreezing and training new folks is easier than unfreezing.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Because you can train them how you want them to be trained. So instead of trying to undo all that negative and undo the bad habits and the bad behavior, is harder because you put too much time, too much effort, too much money in training and trying to make them pretty much what you want them to make for the organization.
I agree.
The cheapest way is to send them on about their way, get somebody new and train them how you want them to be trained.
In the organizational culture that you want, goes back to mission vision. I could go back to, we could go back to Collins, getting the right people on the bus. If you don't have the right people on the bus, you can't get them in the right seats. I could use any incentive analogies this morning, but I'll give you one that's real. The 2 years prior to this academic year, I sat on I might have mentioned this, I sat on the university select finance committee. There was only one staff member, one member that represents graduate and professional schools, one from the nursing, that would be me, that represents nursing. No, that was a nursing. And then one from undergraduate and then one staff. There's just five members. Plus, you have the president of the college, the chief finance officer, and the chief academic officer. So there's 8 people. And during the budget cycle, you sit and you look at the budget. And my argument was, you got to let people go. You can't, you don't have the structure in this organization to retrain people. You've got to let people go. You'll use up all of your resources. They said, but they'll be mad. I said, they'll be mad as hell, but they'll be at home being mad. They won't be here. The friends, you've got that whole issue of the anger, the blowback. I don't need to, don't want to. We've always done it this way. And my argument is unless you have a system in place to retrain these, to unfreeze these people and retrain them and move them, you're much better off from the organizational perspective in terms of time and resources. You're much better off to start with new people and train them the way that you want them, as opposed to trying to unfreeze people who have done it this way forever. I was I had lunch with the new university attorney, and he said, every meeting I go to, this was unprompted, he said, every meeting I go to, when we talk about change as in terms of the new administration that's coming this year, every meeting I go to is we've always done it this way, or we've never done it that way. And that's their answer to anything that the new administration wants to do or stop doing, is we've always done it this way. When they say, why do we do this? Why can't we stop this? We've always done it this way. Well, why don't we do this? Well, we've never done it that way. And that's the stock answer, he said, to every meeting that he goes to, is that resistance to unfreeze, that they can't even get that. They haven't broken through that barrier yet. They've spent from July 1 to now and got really nothing accomplished, according, by all indications, even themselves, because we can't unfreeze the people in order to try to even start moving them. And I've explained, you're fighting a losing battle there. Some people have got to go home. That's your only solution. Because you've got people in senior leadership that don't want to change. We want to do it the way we've always done it. And so that's why, from a personnel perspective, John's got to go. From a consultancy, if you're asking me how to fix John, here it is. But did you see that first presentation today? All that you're going to have to go through to fix John. It's going to cost 10 times what a new employee would cost. And to train a new employee, it's about 10 to 1 the cost of training a new employee and trying to retrain an existing employee, because he's not just him, he has his group, his amen corner. That's wonderful. I love that one. He has his amen corner. So you've not only got to unfreeze John, he's got a support system that's saying, you go, John, we like it like it is. It's not just fixing John. He's got his amen corner.
I think that's especially true given the size of this organization.
Mm-hmm.
You know, because it's such a small organization, they're not going to want to put the time and investment into the retraining.
But as the first group outlined this morning, so very well. Great day. What an ordeal it's going to be, time and money-wise, just to try to retrain John. Do you really want to sign on for that? As we're talking about, we're in two different hats here. We talk about the role of the consultant, but we also talk about, this is, of course, an organizational leadership. As the leader, you know, you're the decision maker. You're the person in charge. You got to know, as Kiana said, it's so much better to start with somebody new and train them the way you want, because you don't have to get over. You just in the moving phase of change process. You skip over the hardest part, thank goodness, which is the unfreezing part. That's the hardest part. That's when you get. I hate to keep mixing metaphors. That's when you get in the swamp and can't get out. And you know, I've told you, my firm belief system is the best way to get out of a swamp, don't get in it. Because it's almost impossible to get out. You've got to make a change here. I would advocate, if I were, again, in my former role where I was in that senior leadership, John would be a no bueno. We don't go any further with him. As a consultant, and you don't, you know, that might be one of the options that I offer, but you have done, you know, this is what you'd have to do if you want to change John. You've outlined that. This is what you're going to have to try to do. You can mount this, you can start climbing this mountain if you want to, but this is what it's going to entail. And that's the correct way to go as a consultant. You got to tell people, this is your option. This is what you're going to have to do. You'd be derelict in your responsibility as a consultant if you didn't outline, all right, here's everything you're going to have to do. Do you really, then the question comes, do you really want to do this? Do you really want to get in this swamp? We'll lead you through it. We'll be right here with you every step of the way. But now, just understand, this is going to be an open checkbook. This is what we're going to have to do. We're not just going to tell you we're going to do a little quick and dirty, you know, a little focus group with John and his group for 15 minutes and it's going to be fixed. That would be malpractice. You've got to explain the options to the senior leadership. This is what it's going to take. This is what we're going to have to do. Do you really want to do this? Or would you rather employ us to train your new person? You know, that's heartless. But the reason why we bring in outside consultants is they don't have the emotional and the loyalty connections of people who are inside. That's why they bring you in from outside. You're not married to the people who are there. You are not advocating for them to keep their job. You are looking at it purely from an unattached, unemotional position. You've got two choices here. This is what you're going to have to do if you keep John. And you're going to be way over here starting. Or we can start here training a new person. And this is what we would do. You have to make that decision. We'll do whatever you want us to do. But we need for you to know up front what it's going to take if you decide to keep John. That's what the first group so eloquently explained this morning. Good Lord, look at all the stuff we're going to have to do. Or from an HR perspective, leadership perspective, I don't really want to do that. What's the least reliable form of data? Self-report. What's the one thing that we all overestimate in ourselves? The ability to change. I know I've said that before, but if you hadn't, write that down. If you don't learn anything else in this course, I want you to know self-report, least reliable form of data. The single thing that we overestimate in ourselves, all of us, is our ability to change. Again, your job as a consultant, give people the options. Your job as the leader is to understand how do we best employ, deploy, utilize the resources in our organization, our time and our money. Excellent, excellent. All right, who's next?
Our group is last. This is Joel speaking.
All right, Jewel, I am making you the host. I'll stop my video.
All right, can everyone see the screen?
Yes, case study, team diagnosis, and intervention.
Okay. All right. So in our team, we have Hannah and Angel, Jewel Harrington, Stephen Harris, Michelle Osborne, and Rose Rickrow. Okay, the next slide.
Are you all able to see the next slide? No?
No, it's not moved yet. It's not advanced.
No.
There we go.
Okay. So as you can see, we have 12 responses, and they answered 11 questions on a Likert scale of 5 points. And that is the quantitative data. There was one open-ended question for the qualitative data. There was no sample used because we used the entire population, and no adjusted mean needed because we didn't have a sample. Right. Next
That is
slide.
correct.
Okay, looking at the data set, as you can see, it's on a 5-point Likert scale, and we did pick up on that this is a methodology issue. On the 5-point scale, you can tell that the quantitative data, if you look at the qualitative data, they don't match. The numbers are high on the quantitative data, but if you look at the qualitative data, you'll see that what they're saying is not matching what's on the numbers.
Correct.
So go to the next slide. we did say that if this middle column here, neither agree nor disagree, if that was left out, all the answers would have been more on the disagree side, and then the numbers would have matched. Therefore, they should have just used the 4-point scale instead, and there should have been a forced response. So no one should have been able to say neither agree nor disagree, and therefore the numbers would match with the qualitative data. Okay.
It's a best practice to do forced response if you're doing explanatory mixed methodology. That is correct.
All right, what do you believe to be happening on this team? So it seems that the majority of the team understands the mission and their roles, but there are some members that do not. The data also shows that there's a lack of communication, a lack of support for each other, and the inability to handle conflict amongst the team. Also seems to be a lack of pride amongst the team members as well. The team meetings are ineffective, and there's not a lot of information sharing that's going on. And there seems to be a split between John's inner circle and the rest of the team.
There you go.
All right, so what do team members say are the team strengths? Well, as we stated with the qualitative data, someone believes that they are a high-performing team. We consistently achieve our team goals and are always on top. They understand their roles. The goals are clear, and individuals understand how the team contributes to the organization's goals.
Stephen, are you still with us? You're muted now.
The team's areas of improvement are encouragement and handling conflict. So we'll notice in survey question 11, there were several people that disagreed strongly or disagreed. As you can see in the pie chart, that's over half of the population that strongly disagreed or disagreed. And then that one outlier that agreed, as Dr. Lamb mentioned, we definitely know that is John. And then we go to survey question number 9. Once again, in the pie chart, you can notice that disagree, strongly disagree, as well as the neither agree nor disagree takes up the majority of the area for improvement for this team. One of the qualitative informations that really stuck out was we don't support each other as a team. I don't think anyone here has my back if I'm struggling. To be honest, I don't trust a single one of them.
Yeah.
So this really highlighted where the team needs to improve within their culture.
All right, let me stop you right there. This person most likely is the leader of the opposition team. The previous slide that said we're high performing, everything's wonderful, we'll meet their goals. Who most likely said that? That would be John.
Right.
So you've got two totally different views of what's going on here. So what has happened is you have John who has the title, and this speaks again to leadership. You have the person who has the title, but then you've got somebody else who's emerged as the leader in place of the opposition group.
So how do we prioritize the opportunities for improvement? You'll notice that this chart definitely highlights the unreliable data that we receive. It's just all over the place.
Yeah.
And so going into this team as a consultant, as our cohort team decided to do in this case, we definitely highlighted the areas that they need to improve. You'll notice that encouragement is the top number one priority. Then it moves to conflict resolution, and then just being a proud member of the team if John is there or if John gets dismissed from his position. And then the last two that are still important to highlight would be job satisfaction, which we'll talk about in our solution, our suggested solution and timeline, as well as the effectiveness of the meetings for this group. And once again, we just brought out some of the open-ended question data that really highlighted why these are areas for improvement. As all of our cohort talked about, the team being cliquish and, you know, just not feeling inclusive of everyone really is impacting the culture and probably the productivity of this group.
Yeah, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, we can hear you. Who was that, Rose?
Yes. Hi, how you doing?
Good.
I'm just worried about my connection since I'm all the way out here. But anyway, how would you present this data in a team feedback session? Well, you want to know and explain why the numbers are the way they are. Management norms need to respond and have the highest and lowest scores from the team that they understand, and they verify. A lot of this is illustrate to communicate. When you're communicating with adults, it's better to verify using different graphics and visualize the outcomes so everyone can understand better, maybe you know, get the thoughts clarified. So you have a clear understanding from the team members and their roles, and have group meetings and individual performance meetings so that that you can talk to them and communicate properly. Doing this saves time. It graphics show relationships. So as you saw the previous slide, that really illustrates very well. You quickly can make your point and steer your conversation. You get attention by having these charts and graphics. There's numerous types of charts and graphics, as that slide is to show. You try not to make too many points with one chart so that you can focus on the message and have a minimal of distraction noise to your communication. You make certain you know what is to be compared, and you recommend or practice the best practices to tell what the results are of your survey, say thanks, you validate your feedback, you get clarification from people on exactly what they were meaning, and be thoughtful and try to connect the dots so you can measure your progress.
Okay. All right, so looking at our intervention plan, we did decide that we were going to have an agenda, which would have our date, our time, our location on it. We would also have a call to order. We would be sure to take attendance, to just kind of review our meeting norms that would kind of go through our protocol. We would have our intervention action plan. We would have our suggested activities, and then we would vote on those suggested activities, because we went back and we were looking at some of our quantitative data, and a lot of the team members felt like John was the one who made all the decisions. So we were going to vote on some of those suggested activities and then adjourn. So looking at our intervention solutions, a good alternative was for conflict resolution. We've obviously got some conflict. So this was just going to help us out with, you know, why are the numbers the way that they are? A mixed alternative that we had was cross-training. We felt that everyone needed to be cross-trained, and even we may need someone else who would know how to do the leadership responsibilities. We kind of went over some things within our team about how we felt, you know, about taking time off. You know, state jobs, every job mostly gives us, you know, time off to take, but then if you're swamped and you don't have somebody else that knows how to do your job, you might take off a couple of days for vacation and come back and you've got stacks of paperwork to do. So we kind of went over cross-training and how that would be important to help out within leadership and within the organization. And we also needed to go over SMART goals, just complete tasks and go over that. Team building was very important for us too. That was a mixed alternative. That would help with the qualitative data. That would help with these people in your circle, the people who feel like there's, you know, different cliques, people who feel excluded, and the ones that, you know, said that they felt like certain things brought them down. A blend alternative that we had was to communicate more efficiently and effectively. That would be, we thought about like interviewing, do one-on-one interviews, more interviewing in depth with the 12 team members to get a buy-in on the role of each staff member and have clear expectations, because we felt like each role didn't exactly know what their expectations were with their job. All right, so now of our intervention plan, this intervention, we are going to have conflict resolution. We are going to have counseling sessions with each member. For our action plan number 2, we are going to reestablish meeting expectations. This would include effective communication, the Robert Rules of Order. We would have weekly meetings, team updates, and we would share documentation. Our action 3, we are going to have a leadership team, and we're going to clarify our roles, and we're going to have an annual performance process. We thought that it was important for each team member to know exactly where they stood. It would make them more aware of areas of improvement and kind of help out with accountability. For action 4, we had professional development, different types of professional development, which would be, you know, how does my role contribute organization? We felt like that kind of would help out with them knowing exactly what their job was, like what their job duties were. Team building was important, escape rooms, going on retreats. We had actually looked at some other organizations within our area, and we know XPO Logistics, they have like yoga classes, which would help with stress. They had kickboxing classes, and they even had a daycare there on site that would kind of help out with the work-life balance. So we thought that was very important. Our action 5, this is kind of redundant. We kind of went over that. The action 5 was cross-training and SMART goals. We talked about how important it is to cross-train each employee. That way, I mean, we're all replaceable, right? So we talked about how important it would be to have other people to know how to do your job. This is just a little slide that we thought the things that we were talking about. The major benefits to cross-training employees, you know, we get a great return on investment. Employees are able to better collaborate. It helps with communication. It increases employee motivation, increases the workplace sustainability, efficiency, and it makes people more agile. Since we were talking about our meetings, we did go over adequate tips for a business meeting. I mean, it was important to be on time. We wanted each person to introduce themselves, be prepared, you know, silence those phones, have a positive attitude, be a good listener, don't eat during meetings, and avoid nervous habits. If you're like me, say a lot, try to avoid that. Follow through on our assigned action items and appreciate all staff. One of the things that we thought was important, we really liked about this slide, was it did go, and we felt that performance reviews would be very beneficial within this organization, because it would show, help each employee know exactly where they stood within their job roles. It did help clarify, kind of go over the things that they needed to know that they needed to be more aware to work on. It would help with administrative and informing decisions regarding reward, promotions, and career development. And it would also help with that termination and dismissal.
Okay.
Does anybody?
Excellent. Excellent. Can you go back to your introductory slide? I've got to go back to the, I've got to go back. One more back. All right. I got to talk a little bit of the academic piece now. Excellent job picking up on this is a population versus a sample. All right, back to our academic piece, the things that we've got to understand in research in terms of the ethics, our methodology. Goes back to descriptive statistics and inferential statistics. We use inferential statistics when we're trying to infer big things about the population from a sample. If we're using the whole population, we do more descriptive statistics, which is what we've done this morning, where we look at mean, standard deviation, we look at distribution, that's frequency distribution. That's what the average is. That's actually a frequency distribution. We look at those kinds of things. So remember that's part of the big picture this morning is when we're working with a sample, we're always most concerned, does that sample represent the bigger population? We do more inferential things. When we are using the entire population, we don't have to do those things. The data is the data. It represents the entire group, and we can move through with more clarity when we're working with descriptive statistics in terms of averages, means, modes, medians, standard deviation, variance, range, those kinds of things. So please remember that you have to apply different methodology when you're working with a sample. You got to treat your data and you got to take many more steps when you're doing inferential work with samples than you do when you're just doing descriptive work with your populations. So thank you for pointing out excellent work that we're working with a population, not a sample here. And so our data is much stronger. We don't have to go through as many steps with our data. That's excellent. I like your cross-training model. I was arguing that the other day. I love the notion. This is a best practice in organizations. This is one of the things that as a consultant, this would be one of the things that I would be keeping a specific eye out for in organizations. Do you have choke points where workflow stops because you only have one person? For example, I threw a department under the bus the other day in a meeting. That's just the way it works. When they said, we couldn't, our workflow stopped. And I said, I don't understand. You only have a 2.5 person department, and the only person trained to do this particular job, and everybody else has to stand around, is the halftime person. Why can't the other 2 full-time persons be trained to do this as well? And you'd thought that I'd pour gas on them and set them on fire. It's about job security. That halftime person feels like if other people are trained, then she can't be a gatekeeper, number one, and number two, they might not need her. And so you can't leave it up to your employees from a leadership sense to make those decisions. Absolutely, in a small department especially, you've got to do cross-training. Otherwise, you get bottlenecks, you get choke points, as we call it in the business. So this is absolutely a best practice. I love your best practice for professional learning communities down in the right-hand corner. This would be, these would be called these norms and values. Mostly these would be norms when we're putting together a professional learning community in a leadership sense. Those are the things that we all have to understand, and we all agree that these are the expectations of your behavior. I love that as well. So try to bring some closure to this morning.
Hello, Dr. Lamb.
I'm going to kind of in a round robin here. I'm going to ask for final thoughts. I'm going to start with Dr. Scarlett.
I do want to say something. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Let me turn my. I'm trying to get my my dashboard to come up. There it is. I've got to move these people out of the way. Let me see. For some reason, it won't let me reclaim the host.
It's okay. I just want to point out, like, when you use the when you use the whole population as your sample, you can say the population is your sample, but you cannot say you don't have a sample. You're always gonna have a sample. It's whether you choose part of the participants from the whole population or it's gonna be your whole population, but you always have a sample.
Yes. Excellent point.
That's that's everything.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Anything else, Dr. Scarlett, this morning?
That's everything that I want to say. And I also want to say that I like their slides and their presentations. It's very informative and very efficient. And like we learned from each other a lot. And then it's good discussion.
Very professional presentations this morning. Very. Yeah, you would not be embarrassed to take these out to somebody who was paying you as a consultant. All right. Other comments this morning? No? All right. A little closure here. You have to wear two hats. You have to look at things from an organizational perspective. You're a leader in the organization, and you need to look at it from a consultant perspective. But they are somewhat intertwined because even as a consultant, you have to put yourself in the place of the leader. And so that colors the recommendations that you make in terms of you got to know really what you're asking them to do, and you have to put yourself in that place. You've got to know that what you're recommending to them, you give them options, but you've got to know what the option should be. In order to do that, you've got to put yourself in the role as the leader. Again, to summarize, leadership is not a position. It's an activity. You lead from where you are, and so, but you've got to know what leadership is in order for you to have the options to offer as a consultant. The consultant has to assume the role of leadership. Whether it's positional or not, is again, leadership's not a position. Leadership's an activity. And so you've got to project and you've got to put yourself in that role. Otherwise, I'm not sure that you can add a lot of value as a consultant. So that's kind of my closure this morning. You've always got to keep everything we do has to go through the lens of leadership. Period. Anything for the good of the group before we get done? We're actually done 15 minutes early this morning. Imagine that. I appreciate your time, your interest, your talent. Your presentations were wonderful. I am most appreciative of the time and effort, and I am always amazed at the quality of the work. And so I will see you again in 2 weeks. Everybody have a good break in between. See you in 2 weeks. Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye, everyone.
Bye-bye.